Folks, a delightful good afternoon. This is Gary Trevor again with Legacy Men's Podcast with my dear associate Jason Gonzalez and our esteemed guest, Dr. Jim Nichols. We are thrilled today to have Dr. Jim Nichols, who is a family plan doctor. He has been in the practice for over 30 years, but now has gone to concierge doctoring. He is a married, wonderful doctor with 36 years of marriage, 4 children. And again, Dr. Jim, thank you for coming today and sharing your life with us. We appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hey, I want to thank you guys again for stopping by and learning how to live and leave a godly legacy here at the Legacy Men's Podcast. Today, we're going to be touching upon a subject, real men, real loss. So, Dr. Jim, thanks again for joining us. Anything else that you wanted to kind of throw out there? I know you've had a career serving in the ER, family medical practice as well, but could you elaborate just on your background for us, please?
Sure. I grew up in California, San Francisco in particular. I went to Point Loma Nazarene College in San Diego in the early and mid-'80s, and I met my wife, Amy, in college. And like you said, Gary, we've been married 36 years now. We had some 5 or 6 years just living the regular life, and I decided about 26 or 27 I wanted to go to med school, and so I applied and I got in. I ended up going to a school in the Caribbean in a country called Dominica for the first 2 years, and then we moved to England, lived in England, and trained for 3rd year there, and then moved back to the States into Chicago and finished up med school in Chicago. And I did residency at the University of Illinois, Peoria, and was there for 3 years, and then moved from Illinois to Arizona in 2001. And since then, for the first 5 or 6 years, I did just exclusively emergency medicine. And as my kids started to get older, I switched and bought a practice, and I do family medicine. Mostly it's adult medicine, outpatient medicine mostly now. And then last year or so, I switched to a concierge model.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. And just for individuals that don't know just kind of the terminology, so for resident, that means, you're
so residency is after you
anything
graduate,
and
after you graduate college, and then after you graduate med school, and then it's an area of specialty. So then you specialize in whatever your field is going to be. In mine, I picked family medicine, and family medicine is it's a specialty of breadth versus a specialty of a narrow specialty. So we do everything from delivering babies to taking care of grandma in the ICU to doing emergency procedures. So, I always tell people, if you were going to be on a desert island, you'd want a good, well-trained generalist like me to be with you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, fair enough. Thank you so much for honoring us with your service there in that space.
Sure.
And one of the things I think it's curious for us to understand the depth and breadth of how much you have to know and study. Share with us, as you share with Jason and I, the mnemonics on how you learned that in England versus how you do it here in the United States.
Well, you're always quizzed when you're a student or when you're a resident, and you just want to be ready for your attending to ask you any sort of question. And so, there's so many things to remember, but I used to use mnemonics a lot, and specifically I used this mnemonic that I came up with for me, and it was called Tin Pie for Dave. And it was just a way to remember what would be the cause of any sort of problem. And it could be, and I'll just tell you very quickly, any problem could be related to trauma or infection or neoplasm, which is cancer, or it could be degenerative, or it could be autoimmune, or it could be vascular, or it could be endocrine, it could be psychogenic in a person's mind, or iatrogenic, which just means like it's caused by the doctor or caused by medicine. So it just gives you a strategy to think through whenever there's a problem, what could be causing this, and it helps to manage and to think through pathology when you're in the face and when you're right in front of a patient. So I still use it now.
Yeah, I think it's a good example to use even as Christians, as Christian men, as we walk our lives, to really analyze and have an idea of what's going on, to have the right questions, and to pause for a second if necessary to kind of gather the real stuff versus what is said or what is assumed, but to double check that. And if you don't know, to go out and reach for somebody else like yourself who can give you the real answers.
Yeah.
I want to trail back to your life growing up. You were 7 years old to your mum. Your mum wasn't married. Can you kind of elaborate on your youth into adolescence to kind of give us an understanding from where you came to where you currently are today, which I think people will really, it gives them courage to realize that Dr. Jim, you see him, he's successful, and yet he went through some interesting challenges that he stayed the course, but most important of all, as he's told Jay and I, that God, when he became a Christian at 7, God was his first and foremost, and he stuck to his guns. As a result, now we have Dr. Jim. So Jim, share with us the challenges you had and how you got through them from moment to moment, and then Jay and I will inject questions as we go along,
Sure.
sir.
Yeah. So my mom, I was the oldest child, and she was unmarried when I was born. She, obviously a single mom, she's trying her best, and eventually had a younger brother and a younger sister, and she's just trying to raise us the best that she could without ever really having a husband or a father figure in our home. And one of the places that we lived in when I was about 7 years old, we were just living there, and the people across the street invited us to a Nazarene church. It's a Protestant church. And they picked us up in the buses, and my mom was glad to give us each a quarter for the offering so she could have us be gone for 2 hours on Sunday morning. But the people there cared about us and loved on us. And eventually we moved from this town. It was Livermore, California. We moved from that town, 20 miles away or so to another place. And as we moved, my mom asked the church people, "Do you know of anybody else like you where we're going?" And they did introduce her to another family, and that family became our babysitters. And ultimately, as my mom was trying to take care of things, she ran into some trouble and ultimately went to prison for a period of time. And this family was a short-term foster family for us. And I spent most of my, all of my high school years and some of my junior high years in foster care, and bounced from several different foster families. But every time I would move, ultimately, I would realize, okay, I need to go where I'm loved and where I'm cared for. And for me, that was going back to church. And so when I was, I'm kind of skipping forward, but about in high school, I realized that I was at my last foster home, and they weren't church-going people. They were just, people, good people, but just having kids live in their house. And I knew that I needed more than what, I believed I needed more than what they had to offer me. So I reached out to the youth pastor at this Nazarene church, and he came to pick me up. We went for a soda and got to be friends. And I was just one of the guys that was, if church was open, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, I was there, whatever, just because they're good people. And I wanted to be around the good people.
Yeah.
So
let's walk through some of those major changes and how often that ended up happening to you, right? Because we're talking about how real men deal with real loss here, and you had a sense of abandonment from some of this that just, naturally, the human mind it's going to start kind of making some calculations and formulating some different ideology about what's going on, right?
Yes.
And I think some of those connections that you made, and what really resonated with me when we were talking, is about the people that were asking questions in those different high schools, right? Like, you had to have answers for some of that.
Sure.
And that's just the way of life, right? People are, going to question, hey, like your mom, dad, or where you live, or things like that. And at some point in time, it was just kind of like, gosh, like I have to re-explain myself, reinvent myself, and kind of go through these motions. Walk us through that.
Well, when my mom went to prison, I stayed with one foster parent, and he was a friend of mine's dad, and he said he was willing to take me on as like an emergency foster parent, but he did that for about 6 months, and then he realized, okay, he didn't want to do that, and but my mom couldn't take care of me then, so I had to reach out, and I actually found another person to help, another single person that would be my foster dad, and I was with him for about a year and a half, and then he got married, and so as he got married, then instead of me going to live with him and his new wife, they had me all packed up and and I was taken to a new foster home to somebody that I had never met before. So
Yeah.
I've had my fair share of abandonment. I never lived with my dad, my birth father ever, and so I never felt any sort of a connection with him. And my
And
mom.
that one was a tough one, right? Because you were completely oblivious that, you thought you were going to move into the next house, right?
Yeah.
And they met you with a social worker.
Yes.
Your stuff was already packed.
Yes. About as dramatic as you could imagine.
Yeah.
So I lived with my foster dad. His name was Nick. And then when we were packed up and moving from one house to another town like an hour away, when we got there, all my stuff was packed in suitcases and in cardboard boxes and whatnot. And still remember this lady came in a 1972 Ford Pinto, social worker, and they said, "Oh yeah, Jim, you're going to go to another foster home." And I thought, what? I mean, there's no warning whatsoever. It was like today was the day. It was just dropped on me, and I was just kind of very much in shock. And obviously, I'm a Caucasian man. They took me to a family, and it was a Hispanic family, the Chavez family in San Jose, California, and they were nice people, but I didn't know them, and I hadn't really been part of the Hispanic culture, Mexican culture ever, but I was for 3 years when I lived with them.
Okay.
And so it was a very, I had every time when I lived with the first foster dad, it was like I could say to my friends, yeah, this is my dad. Then when I lived with the next one, I could say, yeah, this is my dad, because I changed high schools. Then when I went to the third place with the Chavez family, it was like, okay, I'm as Caucasian as you can get. And and they were a Hispanic family. It was like, okay, it was obvious that I was a foster child, and you don't want to bring negative attention to yourself. I just tried to fit in and keep my head down and whatnot. And but most of my effort at that point was trying to draw connections to the people at the San Jose First Church of Nazarene where I went.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And then tell us about the experience you had was a Nazarene summer camp?
Well, yeah, I did go to summer camps a lot, but as I was getting ready to graduate high school, once you, at least back then in the early 80s, when you graduate, you kind of age out of the system.
Right.
And you have to find some place to go. And I didn't have a place to go. And so ultimately my church friends and family said, why don't you apply to Point Loma? Maybe you can get into college there. And the joke was, well, it's kind of like going to summer camp, but you just got to study. And I'd been to summer camp, and I was great at summer camp, so I just figured I could figure out how to study.
Right.
So, yeah, I applied, and, under probation, they let me in, and that started me on the next, very positive path.
Okay. And this is when you started to study medicine? Or?
No, that was just undergraduate. So that was,
Okay.
I believe that my undergraduate degree is in computer science, of all things, but realized I didn't really like computer science after I graduated.
Got it.
Yeah, so that's why, that's a whole nother story. But
Yeah, and I know Gary really likes to just learn a lot more about, when did you start to walk with Jesus?
Yeah,
Gary,
I think
if
that
you
where
want.
I was going to was basically, which I love the example, you went to a summer camp when you were 12.
yes, yeah.
Was that with the Nazarene Church
Yes,
as well?
it was. Mhm.
And you were sitting at the back or the front, and the word came out,
Yeah.
when you die, do you know where you're going?
Yeah,
So
the classic.
walk us through that normal evangelical outreach thing.
Right. Yeah, it was a standard summer camp, and I could still remember where I was sitting, and the pastor, he, was making his talk, and he said, "So if you were to die tonight, do you know where you'd spend eternity?" And I thought, I don't know, and I know for sure I don't want to go to hell. And he said, so if you'd like to know Jesus and be saved, then come forward. And so I did, and gave my heart to Jesus. And I was about 12 years old then. And obviously I wasn't perfect, but that was a date that, I was stamped and included in God's family. Yeah.
So when you became a Christian at 12, were you still as fervent to stay the Christian walk as you went into college as well? It never left you, your desire to go to church and to follow, and as you said to Jay and I, to hang around with the good guys versus the bad guys.
Yeah,
to keep your life as
yeah, you always have choices, and I just chose to in high school, I thought, you could hang out with and everybody knows this, I'm just going to say it. So you could hang out with the stoners or whatever. And that was just not my choice. I wanted to hang out with the kids that had good families because I wanted to be invited over to their house. I wanted to hang out with them. And that was my model. And that's what, I wanted. And so that was just my pursuit, was to pursue. I wanted a better life, and they seemed to have a better life than what I had and what I had seen, because my mom went to prison because of drugs, and so I knew that was in a way that I wanted to go, and so that's kind of why I tried to stay on that track. And then I just, and the people at church, at San Jose First Church, they loved me, they treated me well, and they encouraged me. And so that's why I knew that being around Christian people was the right place for me to be.
I wanted to bring it back to our subject here. So like that's typically not, I mean, when you see it today, right, that would be like a hero that you positioned yourself, made those decisions, even though, the way that your path had gone previously wasn't drawn out to be that way, right? Like you made those choices, conscious efforts towards finding the right people to hang out with, go to church yourself, right? And really take that on your plate. When you talk about, let's say, the time that your mom was getting out of prison and you still had your other two siblings, right? Mm-hmm. There was another really hard moment that you had to deal with when she took in your siblings and not you. Can you walk us through that? What age that was?
Yeah, so I was about 14 or so then, 14 and a half, and she was getting out of prison, and she was able to pick up my brother, Bobby and Julie, and but she said, yeah, Jimmy, for now, you need to stay where you're at. You're okay, and you're doing good. So let's just have you there, and we'll see how it goes. And I didn't like it because I didn't like being a foster child, and I didn't like living in a variety of places. But it was just, what could you do? It was just that's what I had. And so what it did do is I look back on it now, and I'm glad about it, that it forced me to, let me not say forced, it gave me the opportunity to trust God, because I didn't have a mom or dad to take care of me. And the people that I lived with, I mean, it was more of a job for them to take care of me than it was for them to love me, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Right. And so I became dependent on God. And that was back before there was iPhones, and I mean, the Walkman was just starting to come out. So if you went someplace, you went quietly, And as I walked someplace or rode my bike someplace, I'd sing camp songs, and I would have my own little prayer time as I'm walking from here to a bus stop or whatnot, And that's where I developed my relationship with God, to trust Him for certain things, to try certain things, like trying to go to college as those years came on and whatnot. So I hope that answers.
It does. I'm just thinking about how hard it is. I mean, for individuals that do or don't move, right? For men that have had that type of life where maybe they had families in the military or moved during their high school years, how many times they have to reinvent themselves and find their identity, right? But because you had solidified that in Christ, you already knew who you were and whose you were, right? You didn't have your earthly father, but you had your heavenly Father.
Yes. And
that really helped you to guide towards finding the right people to be with, to be able to have the right path at the end. But
absolutely.
But yeah, so I was curious, because I mean, that's not easily done psychologically for a lot of individuals. They get dropped into a completely new environment, and it's just like, gosh, who am I going to go hang out with?
Yeah, and that's one of those things that I just wonder about. Why all I can do is say thank you to God, because that Romans 8:28 verse, that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. That He let me go through those situations so that I could, trust Him, so that I could understand what other, I can understand a poor person's perspective, because I've been poor, and I can understand a rich person's perspective because, in the world's eyes, I'm rich, But you know what I mean? I'm not saying anything, but I have a nice life, thank God for that. But I've also lived in a culture that wasn't mine naturally, and so I understand a little bit of a different cultural perspective.
That's really cool.
And I don't know why. One time I went and looked through it to see what the data said, to see how many foster children actually end up becoming medical doctors, and it's literally about 1 in a million. So I just think, why am I so special? And it's not me. It's not me that's special. It's that God, chose me, and I think He chooses all of us,
Amen.
and we decide whether or not we follow Him or don't follow Him, and take the opportunities that He gives us or not. And I just said, okay, yes, I'm gonna go. I will say this, and I didn't tell you guys this yesterday. I've always been in the mindset you need to put positive things in your head, and so what you put in your head and what you think about it has a huge impact on you. So, I used to listen to, I don't know if you ever heard of Zig Ziglar before.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
listened
great.
to Zig Ziglar so many times because he was just a positive influence, and it was yes, he had a commercial business, but he was a Christian businessman from that perspective. And so that influence was a huge influence on my life, making me think, okay, I can do it, but I need God's help to do it.
Yeah.
And I think God was like, yeah, Jim, if you want to try it, I'm going to help you. So that's why, I just trusted God, and everything I've trusted Him for, it's worked out good.
And then walk us through as well, I think, Jim, the whole college thing. I mean, if I was going to college, you obviously didn't have any money. At the time, I think you said it was $6,000 a semester. Was
Right.
it for a year?
No, that was a whole year.
A whole year. Back then, that was a lot of money. So
Yes.
you had that, so you had to seek out. So peel back the onion for us on the college, where the funds came from. The other person that came to you and said, you know what, when you're out of school, come and stay with us. And then how you met your precious wife as well.
Yeah. So when I was getting ready to graduate college, I applied to Point Loma. I could either go in the military effectively, or I could go to college, and I applied to college, but I didn't have any money. And but the school did have some grants, and there were some California grants and some student loans, and so they said, if you get in, don't worry, we'll help you pay for it. And I thought, okay. I mean, I don't have anything to lose. So I applied, I got in, I applied for financial aid, and they gave me enough to live on. So I just had to have a part-time job for my living money, my pocket money and whatnot. So that worked out good. But after, during Christmas break, the campus shuts down, like probably most campuses do. And they said, yeah, you have to leave the dorms. Well, I didn't have any place to go. And so I was I was working in this grocery store in downtown San Diego, and had these really cheap, yucky hotels that's where I figured I was just going to stay. But my second foster dad, before I lived with the Mexican family, the Chavez family, he had reached out and found where I was and asked if I had any place to stay for Christmas break. And I said, no, I don't. And he asked, do you want to come stay with me? And he wasn't a Christian man. Him and his wife, they weren't Christian people like that. But I said, yes, absolutely. And so, God provided for me a place. I did not know where I was going to be. And on my own, I was planning to stay in this, really bad place. But it worked out. And they gave me a place and a home, and they gave me a family. And that worked out really good. So I got to have a home with them every summer, every Christmas break, every spring break, whatever. So
Nice.
God used people that weren't, active church people, so to speak, but He used them to take care of me, and I've always prayed for God to bless them for what they did for me and whatnot. And then you said, so what happened then? I graduated college, I had a degree in computer science, and I worked for several years, and Amy and I got married.
So tell me how I think it's a very important point, because you had struggled with rejection and abandonment, and then you met Amy,
Right.
and you wanted to commit to her because obviously she was the lady for your life from God. So how did she unravel that for you and kind of bring faith to bear to walk into this relationship and know she wouldn't leave you?
Yeah, well, we'd been dating about 6 months or so, and I was a senior in college, she was a junior, and I just thought, okay, we're getting too close. I could feel that our hearts were really connecting, and our relationship was she just had the best reputation at school, and she was just wonderful. And I never wanted to hurt her. I never wanted to harm her at all. And I thought, okay, so I ultimately said, after one of our dates, it was about midnight, I was dropping her off at her dorm, and I said, yeah, Amy, I think this is good. I think we should stop dating. And she said, why? I said, well, it's just, we're getting too close, and I don't know if this is going to work. And she said, wait a sec, you want to break up? And I said, yeah. And she said, why? You don't have a good reason to, And she really, she without saying she loved me, she implied that she loved me and that she wouldn't abandon me, because that was an issue for me from my dad originally, from my mom abandoning me, from my first foster dad abandoning me, and my second foster dad abandoning me. And then not being really loved in my final foster home, I just was like, I don't want to get connected to people because it just hurts, But she said, I'm not going to be that way. And so by faith at 3 o'clock in the morning, we decided not to break up. And, here we are 36 years later, that it's been a God blessing, for us. Thank God for that. And thank God for Amy.
Yeah.
And you guys have gone through some other trials that, if you're okay with, we'd like to talk about. This is also, again, just about being a real man during this real
real
loss.
life happens.
Yeah.
We just lived our lives, and eventually, at one point, she was a school teacher, and I worked for an insurance company, and we had a nice little life. But I realized I wanted to do more, and for me, I wanted to go as far as I could in life. And for me, that was to become a doctor. And I thought that that's what I'd like to do. But I didn't know. And of course, I didn't have any money to go to med school or anything. And a pastor at the church that we were going to at the time, Stockton Baptist Church in Stockton, California, this pastor said, well, Jim, if I talked to him about it. He said, so if you had $1 million and you could do whatever you wanted, what would you do? And I said, I'd be a doctor. He said, okay, there it is. That's what you have to go do. And I mean, it sounds simple, but there comes a point that you have to say, okay, you're right. I'm going to try it, and I'm going to go for it. So I worked my regular job, and then I took all the classes, the prerequisites at night or on weekends. So the biology, chemistry, physics, all of those things for a year or two while I was preparing to get into med school, because you had to have those prerequisites done before you could get into med school. And so I did that for a couple of years. And when I did get in, our adventure was I got into med school in the Caribbean. I said that a little bit earlier ago, which, that's a big faith thing to move from, you're born and raised in California, to move to the Caribbean. Yeah. And so that was a challenge that Amy and I accepted. And I went the first semester to make sure that it was real and that I had the ability to do it. And then when I did well in the first semester, she and our son Bobby moved down with us. We lived in the Caribbean. It's like a third world country, except they spoke English. I passed every test. I mean, I didn't tell you guys this yesterday, but every single time I took a test, I mean, I would close the door, get on my knees, and say, "Dear God, please help me," because med school's not easy, and you have to read and study so much, and I would just pray, "Dear God, please help me." I did everything I could, and I passed everything, every single time. I never failed anything, and I'm not the smartest guy. Everybody in med school is sharp. But it all worked, thank God. Then we had another adventure. We got to move to England, and we lived in England. Why did we move there? Because foreign school, you'd have to either bounce around every 6 weeks, and she didn't want to move every 6 weeks. But if we moved to England, they said, you can stay in this one place for a whole year. We thought, okay, let's go there. And so we went, and that went well. No problems there. Came back to the States and finished up med school, and then we went to residency in Peoria, Illinois. And in Peoria, we already had 2 sons, Bobby and Sam, and she was pregnant the 3rd time with our daughter, Kristen. Normal pregnancy, everything was fine. She went into labor, and as the baby was born, baby didn't breathe. And I told Amy, okay, don't worry, they'll take care of it. And the obstetrician said, Jim, you better get over here. So all of a sudden I went from just being Jim and dad to now I'm trying to resuscitate my own daughter just minutes after she was born. And so she had a very unusual disease called arthrogryposis multiplex congenita. Arthrogryposis Man, it's been 25 years. Anyhow, it was a condition that she was kind of she didn't expand her lungs, she didn't flex or extend her legs, so she was just in a position of flexion, and so she didn't breathe well. And so when she was born, she just didn't breathe, and so we intubated her. She only lived one day. You know, what a trauma. We went from 2 healthy boys to a daughter, and 24 hours later, she's dead. I mean, it sounds dramatic, but it's 25 years ago. And it was just a really, really, really hard time. And it was in that time that, you know, when all this was going on, I mean, Amy and I could have got mad at each other or could have been easily, but we just ran together and we ran to God. And there was no place else for us to go. And for our hope, what happens now in our future, I didn't tell you this yesterday, this is TMI. I had a vasectomy the week before because I thought, I don't want no more kids. 3's enough. So that's what I thought.
Right.
And so that was a very, very tough time, you know. But God stayed with us, and we felt not abandoned by God. And
Can you walk us through just, you know, because some gentlemen on the listening in on this just don't know what that's like when you say God showed up, right? And God shows up in various ways, through other people, through the Holy Spirit, through prayer, through community, and you know, your marriage, and just you had already had that strength in your faith. Walk us through what that looked like during that moment.
Well, I think the community, we were in church at the time, and the people that we went to church with at Woodland Baptist Church in Peoria, Illinois, that those people gathered around us and cared for us and loved us, and that our from a God perspective, that it was we felt at peace, obviously, that Kristen was with him in heaven, and that we had peace that he was going to help us through each next day. And that he did help us through each next day, because until you lose a child, or let me say it differently, when you lose a child, or when we lost a child, it's like, oh man, I mean, where's my energy? Where's my fight? Where's my to get up and go? And it's like, I don't care, you know. It's like I don't have the power to do it, but God gave me the strength to get up and go and do my job. And God gave Amy the strength to get up and take care of our 2 boys and to take care of me as a husband and whatnot. And a lot of couples that lose kids, they get divorced. And Amy and I got closer because we just had to, we chose to trust God to help us through it. And he did, and he was faithful. And we didn't get, you know, upset. Or one of the things I said was, when we had a little memorial for her, was that, you know, people will say, well, why'd this happen to me? And I think, why not for it to happen to Amy and I? Because we had God, and we knew that he would walk with us through this problem. And that, you know, when you have your kids, when you're a Christian couple, you have kids, you want your kids to come to know Christ. And obviously, she's at 1 day old. She didn't get a chance. She dies. She goes right to heaven. And so, okay, I'm good with that. You know? And sad that she's not here, you know, and to come home to the house and her bedroom is all made and it's all ready, but there's no baby. And, you know, there were hard times. That was a hard couple of years, you know. And so every time I see a young woman who's born in 1999, I always think about my own daughter from 1999.
Right. Yeah.
So that was... I guess then, if I can, I'll just keep going. So jump forward a few years later, we moved to Arizona, And a couple of years after we've been to Arizona, since I was a foster child, I always thought, well, maybe we'll have foster kids or we'll adopt or something like that. And I realized I didn't want to be a foster dad. I just didn't like being part of the system, but maybe we can adopt it. Well, our next door neighbors had 3 kids that they had adopted, and they had adopted 3 kids from South Korea. And they were a Caucasian family. So we thought, well, maybe we should check into that. So Amy and I looked into that, and we applied. And it is an application process, or was back then. And we applied, and we were able to have a daughter, and her name was So-Yi Kim, but when she came to live with us, we named her Madison. And she was 6 months old when she came to live with us, and she lived her whole life with us, so... and she was just a happy, fun, enthusiastic little girl, and just she fit into our family, and she just made it. We had 2 boys, and we thought we were great parents because we could just say to our boys, "Hey, don't do that. What's the matter with you?"
Mm-hmm.
But you can't say that to your little girl, man.
Yeah.
At least I couldn't. You had to be way more smooth with it. And little did I know that her mom was going to be her defender.
Mm-hmm.
Like for the boys, she would let me say to them.
Yeah.
I could be a little bit more rough with them, but I could not be rough with her.
Yeah.
And so it was a good childhood, and Amy homeschooled her. Then when she went to high school, Madison went to high school, she had a little bit of a rough time. If I'm going too long, just cut me off. So she had a little bit of a rough time just fitting in. And I say because, she was... And I know that I need to be careful with how I say this, but she was Korean, so she was Asian on the outside, but she had been raised with a Caucasian family. And I kind of understood that from being Caucasian and living with a Mexican family for 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. So I had a little bit of that perspective. So she just didn't have the great fit in high school. So she made some bad choices, and she had some very rough times, and depression, and she had the time where she had some cutting and whatnot, and that wasn't good, and it was hard to deal with. But we stayed the course, and we loved her, and we prayed and asked God to help her, and we did all the things that we thought we needed to, and there was a few times we thought that she was going to accidentally kill herself, that not on purpose, but it was just something was going to happen because she would do cutting. It's hard to say all that. One of the things Amy said, my son, the attorney, said, "Dad, just remember, everything you say is going to be out for the whole world, so just be careful what you say." So if you edit that part out, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. I think the important part is that I think she was doing so much of it. I've known you for a good while. She was doing so much, and for you and Amy, it became bigger than you could actually manage, even with the father. And so you finally, even though you loved her dearly, you were tender with her, you had to kind of put your foot down and say, okay, here's the deal. So and I think parents need to hear this sometimes. Instead of deferring it to somebody else, I think we as parents or even grandparents need to put our foot down gently and respectfully and say, okay, at this point, we can't do this anymore. So kind of gently put us through that and then walk us through the balance.
So with Madison, she went to a variety of therapists and psychiatrists, and they were saying, she'll stop cutting. She needs to stop doing that, but it's just she's got to work her way down, and at some point, Amy and I just said, "Is her senior year?" And we agreed, and I said, "We got to say this," and I told her, "Maddie, you have to quit." And done. She said, "I'm trying to." I said, "No, you just need to stop. And if you don't stop," and this is where what you're talking about, I had to put the foot down. If you don't stop, then, we have to start taking things away from you. So the first thing we'll take away is a car. You can't drive the car. And if you still keep cutting, then we'll take your phone. And if you still keep cutting, you definitely can't go away to college. And if you still cut, then you have to go to a psychiatric hospital because we just can't deal with it. You have to stop. And she knew that because we were pretty good about if we said something to her or to the other boys, that she had seen that we kept our word with them, that if we said we're going to do something, we're going to do it. And so she believed us, and thank God she stopped cutting. And That was about 3 months before she graduated high school. And so she finished up, she healed up, she wore long sleeve shirts to college. She went to Point Loma for her freshman year and did fine, but she didn't really fit in great there, so she came home and she went to ASU and was doing fine and really kind of recovered and she had her own she had a relationship with Christ, and it wasn't like out super public, but when she was young, she made her statement of faith. She was baptized, at like 12 or 13 or something, and what a great experience that was. Anyhow, then coming forward, about 21, right after she graduated ASU, this past December, in January of this year, so we're about 3 months ago, almost exactly, she experimented with some stuff, made a decision, and with some things that she shouldn't have done, and she died January the 8th, 2025, and it's very traumatic. She had seizures, and Amy saw her, called 911. EMS came to pick her up. The whole gigantic workup to the ER. Amy called me, and I'm working, and she said, Maddie's having a seizure. And so I came home, and I'd already taken her to the hospital. As soon as I got into the hospital, being an ER doc, because I did ER medicine for years, I looked and I knew, dang it, this is not good. And she lived for about 8 more hours, and she died.
But I think that the thing that resonates with me and has never left me, when you lost Kristen, the Spirit of God quietly said to you, it's going to be okay. She's with me. She's good.
Yeah.
And the same experience happened to you when Maddie died as well.
Yeah,
the
well,
moment that
yes.
basically her spirit left and her body stopped functioning, the Spirit of God said, I got her.
Yeah.
I got her, Jim. She's okay.
Yeah, and when she was going through all that and her heart rate was coming down, her blood pressure was coming down, it was obvious that she was going to die, at least from my perspective as a physician. I knew that she was going to die. My prayer was, and I was asking God, okay, dear God, is she okay? Is she right with you? And what I heard in my mind, not audibly, but in my mind, was, she's mine, Jim. And so that gave me peace of mind. And as she was really dying, and once she died and her heart went flat into asystole, and she had died, I said, dear God, what about now? And I heard him say, she's with me, she's mine, don't worry. And so that gave me great peace of mind to know that, because, it wasn't the best choice right before you die, and but that once we're saved forever, and and that gave a lot of peace of mind and hope. It still stinks that she's not here, and I miss her terribly, and I come home and the house is quiet, but I have to keep coming back to, she's with God. She's with God, and that's what you always want for your kids, but, and so, again, this is the second time Amy and I have had to go through this, and we, again, came to each other, and we go to God to trust him, and God has been faithful, that we don't feel abandoned, we feel loved, we feel hopeful for our eternal future, that but we'll also be empowered to live today, because the sun showed up the next morning, and it was, and you still have to go to work and to live life, and God has given us just strength for the day, and it keeps you focused on having the relationship with God in the moment. Gives you strength gives us strength for this one day, and then worry about tomorrow if it shows up.
One of the things that you had mentioned as well is just the gentleman that she was dating started to come to church as well along the ways, and I think this for many individuals, right? That Maddie actually went to heaven, and so a big reason why to continue in the faith, and for Chris to come to Christ and all of that, is to be able to see her again, because you love her, he loved her, and that is the truth in the way.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
And so just a beautiful testimony.
Yeah.
as well
So
that
she had
I-
the boyfriend. I'll just summarize. She had a
Yeah.
boyfriend, and is one of those other. I mean, he was 18 years older than her, and that was like so weird. You know, any dad could imagine you'd have your daughter with a boyfriend who's 18 years older. It was really odd and awkward and uncomfortable to start with, but to me, he proved himself for 3 years that he loved her and that he valued her, and so when she died, he was very, very, very broken, and he's a good man. But going to church and being a Christian, that wasn't his thing. But when Maddie died, he said, "Well, if that's the only way I'm going to see Maddie, then okay, then that's what I have to do." And so since then, he's gone to church with us several times. He's gone to grief share here at Cornerstone, and I think he's on his way,
Right.
and we'll pray for him. And part of me says, well, it'd be easy just to abandon him, and if he ever watches this, that'll be interesting. But it'd be easy to abandon him. But at the same time, I think my first thought is, Maddie wouldn't want that. She would want me to stick by him. But even more than that, Jesus would not want me to abandon him.
That's a
And
good
so
point.
that's my higher. I wish I was thinking more that I'm doing this because Jesus is saying, Jim, take care of Chris for me. Be close to him, reach out to him. But my first thought was, I would want Maddie to be happy with what I did with him. And so I still think that Jesus is good with it because, nobody wants to be abandoned. And their relationship it was just those two. I mean, he didn't have a whole lot of other contacts besides Maddie and us. And so if we would have just turned our back on him, okay, this guy's lonely in the world and he's
Right.
got to build everything up from nothing. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that added to it, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that's
And then
solid.
I think another thing too is that you would talk about I'm a father of a daughter as well, as is Gary. But something that's just so deep and just amazing to share is that Maddie would pray for you on some of your toughest days.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
There was she didn't have her Christian faith on her sleeve, I guess, like I would say, but I would have a rough day and I'd come home and I would just be mad from some business deal or whatever, doctor thing that wasn't insurance companies, okay, I'll set it, that wasn't right, and I was really upset, and she could just tell, and probably about 2 months before she died, she came up into my room and she said, Dad, and she came in and she said, I know you're mad, but can I just pray for you? And I thought, I just for her to pray for me, because I prayed for it 1,000 times, and for her to pray for me when I hadn't, it just meant so much, and that was like another validating point that she really did have Christ in her heart, even though it wasn't like, showing out like as much as we might want it to show out, which is superficial and frivolous, but she had Christ in her heart, and she knew where to go when there was trouble, and she knew that she couldn't fix the problem, I couldn't fix the problem, but she knew that God could fix the problem. And her praying for me just changed my mind, changed my heart, and it was able to wash that problem away from me. And so, yeah, we're I was very fortunate that she did that. I have a great memory. Thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, thank you, Jay.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Dr. Jim, thank you for
Yeah.
really a good, solid visit.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
pray, folks, that you would take to heart what Jim has said.
Agreed.
And the bottom line is we don't have tomorrow, we have today. So let bygones, be transparent with your kids, forgive them, love them, and don't take anything for granted, and don't worry about tomorrow. Jim, we really appreciate you taking your time, and your life I've known you for many, many years, and your life never changes. It's always light, hope, and just a gentleness in which you embrace both my wife, who's a patient, and the men around your life as well. So thank you for that, Jim. We appreciate it
Thank
very
you.
much.
My privilege. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so
much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you,
for having
Jim.
me.
Thank you.
Thank you.